All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to episode 34 of Let Your Words Count. I am Gary Gant, joined by Ethan Merriweather and friend of the show, Elder James Cole. Thank you for joining us again. Please remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and leave us a comment. If you'd like to suggest a word of the day, we would give you a shout out if we use your word. All right, so as we get started today, and I'll do the definition, Ethan will jump into the etymology, and then we'll start the discussion. So today's word, as you saw in our opening screen there, kind of highlighted by the Serenity Prayer, today's word is acceptance. Okay? So we jump into the definition of acceptance, and acceptance means the action of consenting to receive or acknowledge something as it is without resistance or denial. And I think another screen we were looking at, without judgment, is another part of that. Okay, so the action of consenting to receive or acknowledge something as it is without resistance, denial, or judgment. And we did have a second part to the definition here. We can kind of look at, we'll probably come back to this. Let's jump into the etymology first, and then we'll kind of keep this screen up maybe as we are going back and forth about the feelings and the positive or negative aspect of the word. That's all right. Okay, so next we will jump into the etymology, and we'll pass the ball over to Ethan.
All right. Good evening, everyone. So the etymology of the word, from Latin acceptere, meaning to receive willingly.
My bad. Sorry, the screen is messed up. Go ahead, bro.
Now, it's willing, from Latin acceptere, meaning to receive willingly, a frequentative of accepere, add to, capere, take. At its root, the implication seems to be an active choice to receive. And I believe it's with something consciously.
Sorry about the
timing
of the slide here.
No, that's fine. Yeah. So let's read that again. Latin acceptere, meaning to receive willingly, a frequentative of accepere, add to, capere, take. At its root, the implication seems to be an active choice to receive something consciously.
So coming from that root word to take in
to
Latin,
take.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Very good. All right, gentlemen. Go back to the cameras, and we'll go back to the positive and negative aspect as we're talking about that some more. So, any initial thoughts on what we had so far on the word acceptance?
Yeah. If you want to go ahead and start off, there's so much going on in my mind concerning it. So
this is a packed one, right? So we've had some I won't say challenging words, but some words that make you think a lot these past few episodes. And acceptance is probably going to be another one of those episodes like that. Immediately right off the bat, my mind, and I don't know why I do this, I'm breaking things up in the way I'm approaching or thinking about this subject, because I see acceptance as having a few different layers to it. Mm-hmm. So I look at acceptance in terms of accepting conditions in your life, and whether or not you've accepted things as they are, or are you actively trying to change those things. And again, there's no positive or negative to that. It just depends on whether you're satisfied with things as they are and you accept them, or if you're not satisfied and are not accepting them and are trying to change them. I think there's another aspect of acceptance of yourself, which is a big one that is often missed, I think. When we talk about self-love, self-healing, we talked about self-validation a few episodes back, right? Accepting yourself as you are, with that caveat, doesn't mean that you're not trying to grow, doesn't mean you're not striving for your best self actively. But it's also that process of loving yourself and accepting yourself as you are along that journey. Because to not do so, psychiatrists are often talking about how that can be like a destructive mentality for whatever the reason may be, to not accept yourself or to blame yourself for certain things constantly without trying to, again, find a path to healing or to recovering yourself. And the third thing in my mind is acceptance of other people. And I'm sure there's probably more things we can kind of divide that up into, but right now those are the big three in my mind: is accepting of situations in your life, accepting yourself, and accepting other people and how that looks. And I think that there is a lot to be said in terms of mental health. And again, psychiatrists, psychologists talk about, accepting the self and how does that look in terms of accepting other people as well. It's easy to have reasons why you would not accept somebody else. Probably not going to jump right into that right now, but there's a lot to be said around why people do or do not receive or accept other people. Whether what they say, what they think, just their presence alone, there's a lot to unpack there. So with that kind of as an opening, I'm not sure if you guys have any specific aspect of that you'd like to jump into or any thoughts on the topic.
Yeah, you said a couple of things here. I had to jot them down about accepting the situation is very interesting, because I think one of the things that I would say I'm currently working on is to apply these words in my life properly. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that I've looked at acceptance properly, because if you look at the definition as well, it's about acknowledgement too, mm-hmm. right? So if you look at accepting or acceptance in some form is being able to acknowledge the reality as it is, mm-hmm. you see. And I think that at first I had an assumption how things were to be. That's mm-hmm. how I viewed acceptance, because mm-hmm. I've assumed, and that's one word we've never touched on, and we should have. And actually, assume was one of the reasons why we started the program to begin Absolutely. With. We were talking about the differences between assume and presume, right? So if going back to acceptance, I think that I've been looking at the word improperly. And now that we're breaking the word down into its truest form, I'm able to apply it in such a way where liberation can be in action with the acceptance. Because I think with the acceptance is not to imprison. And I think sometimes we don't properly use the word, well, for me, this is my experience. No one else have to have that experience but me. It's something that I had to grow from. Is almost an imprisoning, going back to the word you use about judgment, mm-hmm. when in the not the etymology, but the definition, mm-hmm. you were talking about the judgment of mm-hmm. such. That is very powerful when it comes to acceptance, because what are you becoming in the process of how you view the situation, yourself, and other people? Mm-hmm. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. If there's no liberty at the end of the process of that acceptance, I think that you're accepting wrong. If that makes sense. You know what I'm saying? So if anybody else want to say something, I'm still, once again, I like to think about this a little bit more,
I like the way you use the word acknowledge with respect to acceptance. Mm-hmm. Because what comes to my mind is I look at acceptance as an is thing. Whether it's positive or negative, it all depends on what it is that is in question, mm-hmm. if I can say it that way. Mm-hmm. Earlier you said you spoke of three, one situational, mm-hmm. two personal, mm-hmm. and then three of others around you as well. Mm-hmm. One of the things that came to my mind was acceptance does not necessarily have anything to do with agreement.
True.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And I think that's an important thing to point out, because there are times where we need to be accepting of the reality of the situation that we're in. Okay. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean we agree with it or mm-hmm. we want to be there. Mm-hmm. Okay. So then once you accept where you are, then that's a starting point whereby you can spring forward if improvement is necessary. Mm-hmm. I was, at home last week, and we watched that Denzel Washington movie about the poets back in the early 1900s. What was the name of that movie?
Is it Macbeth?
Yeah. No, the ones where they were at Wiley College and they were debaters. The Great Debaters. The Great Debaters. Yes. Yeah. And of course, they were in a situation that, of course, they had to accept. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't say they were powerless, because that mm-hmm. was that was a great mm-hmm. part of the movie, mm-hmm. where even though you have to accept the situation present, mm-hmm. doesn't mean that you either agree with it mm-hmm. or that you are powerless to make a change. Mm-hmm. And so, with respect to the word acceptance, reality come to forefront to my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
whether you agree or disagree, whether you like it or not.
Mm-hmm.
And so then also with respect to acceptance, then because you mentioned earlier about improvement,
Mm-hmm.
okay, because that way we're not allowing denial to come in,
Right.
okay,
Right.
because if I disagree with the situation and say I don't accept it, then I'm denying the situation, you know. And so,
Interesting.
you know, you went, you know, swimming and then there's a baby shark hooked onto your hand. And you say, no, it's not, because I don't want it to be there,
Right.
right?
Right.
You can't deny it just because, you know.
That's
Absolutely.
so true.
So then, of
Absolutely.
course, the rational mind will say, okay, how do I get out of the situation?
Right.
Because I first have to accept the situation.
Absolutely.
So I guess the first thing that came to my mind is acceptance does not have anything to do with approval or disapproval.
Yes.
It's just a reality. It's where you are.
Very good.
Very good.
I love that. And adding that bit in about, not that bit, but that part in, that very important part of acknowledging reality. You know what I mean? It's like that, because that, when we talk about accepting of situations, that is the first step, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're in a situation that you don't want to be in and you want those circumstances to change, you can't properly address what's needed to change that circumstance if you're not looking at the reality of the situation or what really lies in front of you. You have to look at, okay, I have this shark on my hand. The shark has a strong grip. You know what I mean?
I don't
If
know where that came from.
No,
That
but I
just
mean,
popped into my
it
head.
fits. It's fine, right? 'Cause I mean,
okay.
it's an example and an analogy we can use, because if I start thinking I have some other animal or something else going on, I can't properly address that situation. I have to first look at it and say, okay, I'm here, right? And as you said, I'm accepting this is the reality of it. But once I recognize this is not the reality I want to persist, then you have to start taking actions to change based on what's really happening, not based on what's going on in your mind and your imagination. If you think you got a little goldfish stuck to your finger and you try to address it that way, it's not going to do anything, because it's not the reality of your situation. You got to really look at and accept what's there if you're going to be pushing towards changing that for something better, right?
Yes. Actually, I have so much more with respect, but I don't know if we're
Sure.
ready to go there yet. Okay. Yes.
I bet.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
go
bet.
ahead.
As I was coming here today and thinking about the word, acceptance is one step of a longer process. Because, of
agree.
course, to say you accept something means that something else had to happen prior to you getting there, right? And so then now there was something that became a reality, if you will. And now it's been presented to you. It's crossed your path, okay? So then now you have to deal with the situation, okay? Acceptance has to do with, use word acknowledgement. You have to have knowledge of something, okay? And then along with having knowledge of something, whether sometimes it's a situation where, like I just spoke, it has nothing to do with whether you agree or disagree.
Right.
Okay, but then there are other instances. There are numerous instances where it has everything to do with it, because once you accept something, and then you take action based on your acceptance of it. But then conversely, if you do not receive that which has been presented to you to either accept or reject, so then now you push it away, and then therefore it can't become a reality to you,
Right.
or you can't work on it and take it further.
Right.
So I look at acceptance as the mid step towards, because once you accept something, now action is going to follow.
Correct.
Should.
Yeah, it should.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Action should follow. So that's what I'm saying. I look at acceptance as one of numerous steps that have to take place, because the end being taking action if one does actually take action.
Got you.
Man, that's deep.
Got you. That's deep.
That's deep, man. I was just thinking about like, you know, in the automotive realm, there's a whole lot of conditions that have to be met. You have tolerances, you have acceptance, you have drawings that you have to sign off on. You know what I mean? You have, and things that have to be agreed to when it comes to different conditions of a part that needs to be made, right? And there's acceptance criterias that are put in place. And even though today's subject is really talking about maybe a social, possibly economical a personal level, but there's also a level or approach that you could look from a building type of thing, right? I think that, and the reason why I say that, because at the end of that process, the end of that process of agreeing or accepting drawings and signing off on this particular part so it can be built, there is something that's going to come at the end of that process, right? There's something that's going to be manifested at the end of that signing off, right? And so one of the questions that I would have in my mind is, if I do accept this, what is going to be the turnaround, right? Sometimes it's an uncertainty, and that's something that I have to work on within myself, to remove myself out of the equation, right? And really, going back to the word acknowledge, right? The reality and the real. When you say, what is the next step in the process, that's where I think sometimes where the hesitation can be, and maybe the confusion can possibly be. And I think that we're talking about the negatives and the positive sides of this thing. And I think the notes were up here that we had about the negatives and positives. It was the negative is, or the positive is, the feeling that you have is grounded, freeing, and healing, right? Is the acceptance, right, part of the positive.
Get on the screen if you want to look at it.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, here we go. If you look at the screen, it says the positive side is grounded, freeing, and healing. The negative side is passive, defeating, and misunderstood. Okay. And I think that, if I'm honest with myself, I think that I was more from holding on to the negative side of acceptance for so long. Why? Because I knew that there was an action that had to take place after I accepted. And I'm just being real. I'm just being absolutely authentic with it, right? That's no different than that drawing that's signed off. Once I know that I sign off for this drawing, or someone signs off on this drawing, who knows how this product is going to work? You see, but you're putting trust in the person that's giving you this thing, that they're honest enough with that information, right? And so that's kind of like what, and me, that's the reason why I have this skeptic side to me, where skepticism, when it comes to someone handing me something and wanting me to accept something, I say to myself, like, okay, what's going on with this? you know what I mean? I hope I'm clear with what I'm saying. And I'm gonna say this, and I'm gonna shut up. So it's that feeling that you have of hesitation, of am I going to lose something from my side and they gain something, right? Am I going to be reduced in some type of way, in a negative aspect, so they can be lifted up, right? If it's negative, that's what I'm saying, from a negative standpoint. I had to get away from that mindset. You know what I'm saying? Of course, I don't think like that anymore. But what I'm doing is I'm laying on the table the different possibilities that you're talking about, right? And I think that acceptance is a huge conversation to have, because there's so many caveats and so many cautionary things that can come or can be produced in the process of that process, or in the process of that action. I double dipped the word. Anyone else?
Things change.
Yeah.
Things are fluid, if you will. Marriage. Someone comes together in marriage, and you have a particular mindset and an understanding. And then over time, things, quote unquote, change. Is that good? Is it bad?
Right.
It's neither. It is.
Right.
It's an is situation.
Right.
And so then you could say, well, okay, now I'm dissatisfied because I thought you were this way. Because it's always the you and not the me, right? But in reality, it's we both, okay? And so then there are adjustments that have to go on. And then am I going to look at the reality of the situation that we're currently in and accept where we are. Because, see, in doing that, now I'm having to deal with my own desires or imagination of how I thought things were going to go
Exactly.
versus where things currently are.
Exactly.
Okay, so then that goes back to where we're grounding ourselves now. And so, churches, for example, I was happy at church until all of a sudden things aren't the same as they used to be, right? And I think we all know a little bit, well, actually, we all know a lot about that, right? And so, and sometimes it's because things didn't really change.
Right.
We were the ones that changed.
That's true.
We became more aware of what was going on.
Right.
And so then once again, now we have to be accepting of the situation that we're in.
Right.
Sometimes people choose to remain even though they accept the reality of the situation that they're in, because this is where my friends are, it's my families, are my associations. And so then therefore, because of that, things are going to, I've chosen to stay with the group, even though I am not in agreement
Right.
with the present, but I am accepting that
Yes.
the present is the present. And so then I think about how that wears on your mind. Because see, now it's a trade-off now. You want
Absolutely.
certain things, but you
That's
don't
it.
like the other things.
Right.
But if you accept the fact that things are the way, in this case, you don't want them to be, but you've already made a choice that I'm not going to move on. Accept it
Wow.
and
Wow.
deal with the situation. I often tell people that oftentimes when you're dealing with an individual, they're operating based on their spirit, if you allow me to put it that way. And their spirit isn't going to change.
Right.
Okay, so then if you're going to choose to remain in that environment with that individual, you have to accept them as they are. Now, of course, that doesn't limit you from adjusting how you deal with the individual. But I tell people from time to time, if you know what you're dealing with and you choose to remain, don't complain about the individual because that's the way they are.
That's right.
And you're not going to change them.
Right.
So you
Right.
accept the fact that they are the way they are, and you are choosing to remain in that environment. Because see, so many people don't realize that, and that's why you get a lot of complainers, whether it's in a family, within a marriage, within a church, on the job, whatever. You get people complaining because they don't like the situation.
Right.
But sometimes, not that complaining is good, but if you're complaining and is working towards bringing forth a change, that's
Sure.
one thing.
Sure.
But if you're just belly aching about the situation, then there's no benefit in you just complaining about the situation, especially if you choose to remain in the situation.
Very important. Very important. And you mentioned a couple words there because I think this word acceptance has overlaid our word complacency that we've done before, right? If you accept and remain in a situation that you don't want to be in, or in a situation that's not favorable for you, and you say, well, this is just the way it is, I can't change and I'm going to accept it, there's an aspect of complacency that comes into place when we looked at like the negative feelings, being too passive or being too accepting, if there is such a thing. But this is where I think there is an important intersection, in what you were saying, because, and you kind of brought up like the example of a marriage, the acceptance of a situation has a very important intersection with the acceptance of who you are, how you think, what you're striving for. Because if my goal for myself is to be a person that's happy with, everybody around me no matter what, you're going to have a hard time when it comes to a marriage that maybe has a period, like all periods do when you have two people that come together from different places and backgrounds. There's going to be a period of contention there at some point in time. So if you're the kind of person that's of the mindset of being selfish and always being happy no matter what, and this person makes you mad, in this situation, you're going to say, I don't accept that situation because that violates who I want to be and what I want right now.
Okay.
Whereas if on the other side of that coin, if your mind is, I want to be a good husband, then you look at the situation, okay, there's contention. How do I resolve this problem? It's not just me in the situation I have to look at, and this is where I think an acceptance plays an important part, is how your acceptance affects other people.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be for everybody a requirement. It is to me these days. looking at how your acceptance and your actions affects you and affects other people, to me, are vital parts of that, the decision of accepting something or acting to change a situation. And again, if I've entered into a situation and I've made a commitment that we're going to make this work out, we're going to get past struggles and hardships or whatever, then you have in that mind, you have in your mind the kind of person that you want to be and what you're willing to accept from yourself. And then you have to look at where does that intersect and where does that merge with the situation that I'm in. And can I accept the situation or not accept the situation? And then if I do accept it or not accept it, how am I affecting myself? How am I affecting other people that are involved in that situation with me? So I think you have to kind of come into any situation, first understanding what your goals are. In other words, you brought up that's very important, is change. I know how much the past 10, 12 years, I've changed on a lot of different things. And in that change, there was adjustments I had to make to what I accepted, of myself, what I accepted of other people, what I accepted of my situations. As I changed, those things changed as well. And I had to be constantly adjusting based on who do I understand I am right now. Okay, who do I understand I am today? And, next week, next month, next year. And as those things change, my tolerance level of what my situations were changed as well. My tolerance level of people changed, because once I started realizing that there is a way I can act and call it love and it not be that, I had to reevaluate, what do I want love to mean to me? When I had to look at fear and how that looks, and do I want to be in a relationship that has it as a component? And I would tell you, if you all as friends of mine, if the condition of our friendship and of our being together is I have to come and, I know that you're threatening me, or you have some looming threat that if I am sitting next to you and if I don't say the right thing, you're gonna reach across the table and backslap me, right? if I have that fear of, if I sit next to him and I violate what he's told me to do, I'm gonna get hit. Okay. I'm not gonna come around you.
Right.
So we have to think about, what does that acceptance look like to other people? What are these criteria, or the conditional acceptance, the conditions we put on other people? How does that affect others? And then once you see you've affected somebody else, because this is what got me, realizing the reality of how I affected other people caused me to reflect on who and what I accepted and how I handled what I accepted and what I didn't. And you brought up the great point. Acceptance doesn't mean agreement. And it doesn't mean that I accept some things somebody does. But I have to carefully weigh the result if I choose not to accept the person. I cannot accept an action or something else, but don't reject the person because of that, if there is good that can be done, or if there is a positive impact that can be had there for you or for that person, right?
Indeed.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's powerful, because I do believe that that goes on to the positive side of healing, and I think healing is such a missed process. If we use acceptance as a tool for growth, I think that is very that is a, I keep saying very, and
Yeah, good, bro.
it's a phenomenal process for healing, acceptance. If once again, I think the stages of growth is going to open up doors that you missed before, right? And like I said, now that I'm looking at acceptance, forgiveness, adapt, because if you look at acceptance, it actually ties to our previous cause, like with complacency, right?
Even forgiveness, we did
forgiveness,
last week, right?
resilience,
Right.
and adaptation. Because acceptance is all about adapting, man.
Yes, it is.
It really is, because you have to adapt to a current situation that's been brought to your attention. And the word definition is about you consciously taking it and you're receiving it, right? So what do you do with that? Now you have to make an effort and a choice, and judgment is going to be a process of that, right? And you can't deny it, right? It's like once it's there, it's like, I got to work with this. We've been talking about the acceptance part. So I think that once we understand this journey of acceptance, which is very hard, some of these conversations is very hard, because because you're going to talk to people that have these traditions in their mind of what it looks like within the process, right? And when people have a preconceived idea or thought process, you said this, James, about the imagination, right? That's the mindset that I had of assumptions. I've assumed, but I didn't really know the reality. I didn't know the experience of someone. I may be aware of it in some way, right? But not fully. But that's okay. The whole idea is going back to what you said, is it is what it is. Where do we go from here? You know, and I think that that's very important.
Absolutely.
This is another thought. Actually, there was a question. Mrs. Mary H., she said, that's great, yourself, your life, did you say, and other people. But she said, what about a mindset that differs from your own current mindset?
Very good question.
I think that was a very good question.
Very good question.
Anybody want to take that on? Let me think about that for a second.
Well, I'll give a short answer and say that's life.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'm not trying to be facetious in saying that, because people think differently, people value differently, but yet we all come together. So then now this is where tolerance comes in. Okay, and you keep mentioning the word judgment because you know, judgment not to what I believe what most people call judgment is not really true judgment. In my opinion, is you have to assess the situation.
Yes.
So then if you assess that the individual that you're dealing with is not where you are, then you've judged the situation. Okay, I believe what most people call judging is when now they start condemning the person because they're being that way. But when I say judgment, I'm just talking about assessing the situation.
Correct.
So when you're dealing with someone, and the reason I said that's life is because it is. People are different. People value different things. And of course, what that means is it doesn't mean because I like something and you don't, doesn't mean that what I like is bad or good depending on the viewpoint. Okay? But if what I like means you don't get what you like, because now we're getting into maybe a group situation, right? And there can only be one decision. You have 4 or 5 people come together and let's make a decision, you know.
Yeah.
Someone's not going to be happy.
Right.
But then someone is going to have to accept the situation.
Yes.
So in this case, accepting what? If I'm going to remain part of this group, this association, and the group has decided to go this path, I have a couple of choices. I'm going to take my ball and go home, so to speak, you know, or I'm going to consent and accept the situation because I valued being part of the group is greater than me getting my choice in this particular situation.
Very good.
So now think about that when you're dealing with other people.
Right.
You know, people are the way that they are. And so see, now this comes into trying to convince someone to do something that maybe they don't see it yet. But then how are you presenting it so that even if they consent or accept your understanding, they know that you're not doing it to bring harm to them. So see, now you have someone they're not quite sure.
Right.
You know, because we've all been in that situation. Well, I don't know. I'm just going to trust you on this one, right? Well, are you worthy of the trust?
Right.
Have you
Very
presented
important.
the situation in
Very.
such a way where now I will accept, not that I agree with the path that we're going on, but I accept or I have confidence in the fact that I believe that you are so impassioned by this choice and you believe it's the right choice. I'm going to yield and then just accept and go along with it
Until we can't anymore, right?
until we can't anymore.
Yep.
So yeah, so it takes also, I don't want to say give and take, but and that's why the Bible brings up wise counsel. You know, and I just think about it, you know, you have wisdom, you have judgment, you have faith, you have zeal, and all, you know, say they're all sitting around and a choice has to be made, right? Well, zeal would say, yes, let's just hit them hard and hit them fast and let's go. But then temperance will say, well, yeah, we need to, but not in that manner. And so then there's a give and take, and that's where the counsel comes in at. And so when you talk about acceptance, so then now the group, when they accept, one may say, let's do it and let's do it fast and hard. Others say, no, or not. Yes, we need to do it, but now is not the time at all. So maybe the choice is to do nothing right now. But that doesn't mean we're not going to do anything.
Right,
It's
right.
just not right now.
Right.
And so going back to the question on the phone, I mean, that was called in. Yes. I'm sorry. I think I'm talking too much.
No,
I'm
you're
gonna shut
perfect.
up.
No, you're good. You're good. You made I was pointing the finger, just saying that you made an excellent point that I was just thinking about, because I do believe that there's a misuse of acceptance, right? And I believe that if you're using it in the form to silence people, just to accept, that's where the authenticity of the individual needs to be addressed, right? You just don't accept something just to keep somebody silenced or not allowing them to clearly articulate their thought process, right? You know what I mean? When you said this, that you value what this person have to say. See, I think that there's two things that can happen. I think that there can be, when you value something, you can accept it, or is it by force? I do not agree, me personally, I don't agree when things are being forced, then you can bring any authenticity behind it. That's me personally. You know, you have to allow, because I think the perfect example that you put up there was the counsel, and you talking about you have zeal, you have wisdom, you have, you know, might, and all these different things that's coming up, and the self-control will always drive people crazy. Most people that are temperate, have temperance, drive people nutty, especially a person that wants to go at it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Because there's a value to each process. There's a time, there's a balance. And that's what I'm saying. Like, when you talk about acceptance, you have to allow everyone that's within the conversation or possibly be impacted, right? Is opportunity to think. I'm gonna just say it as simple as that. You know what I'm saying? Just the opportunity to think about it. When a person is forced to make a choice, I have an issue with that, man. I just, that drives me nutty, man. You know, because you gotta give people don't arrive to the finish line at the same time.
No, they don't.
You see what I'm saying?
No, they
and that
don't.
goes back to the question about what about a mindset that differs from your own current mindset. Everybody arrives to the finish line differently. You see what I'm saying? So when you talk about a huge word like acceptance, boy, it could be manipulated left and right.
And I think that's what you have to be careful of, right? Because you have to be mindful of anybody that tries to weaponize your acceptance against somebody who thinks differently from you.
Yes.
Because, and I don't know about you all, I've never met a person who thinks exactly like I do on every single thing, right? So if you start to let differences in opinion and mentality start to become a reason to cast somebody off, separate from them, treat them a different way,
Boy.
get ready for your entire life to be like that, because you will eventually come on some topic, no matter how much you find yourself alike somebody else, you will find something that you all are not aligned on. It's just going to happen. So I think it's better, and I've tried to adjust myself to this approach, is you meet somebody new, you meet somebody that's coming from a different place, has a different experience by whatever that's defined by, religion, race, nationality, going down the line. If somebody's coming in with a different mentality, I try to approach that situation as, this person has different experiences than me. Let me see what I can learn from them.
Yeah.
Right? Because if they've gone through some things that I haven't, I want to first hear what they have to say. How have their experiences shaped them? And how has it affected the way that they think and the way that they address life and the way they approach life and so on and so forth? I want to approach every situation like, hey, you're different. I want to talk to you. I want to see what your experiences have been. I want to see what can I learn from you. And I think if we approach everybody with that mindset, that's acceptance right off the bat. That's not, you're different than me, I don't want to be around you. It's, hey, you're different than me. What has that meant for you? What has that driven you to see that maybe I don't see? Because, and that's what I think is one of the best side effects of diverse environments, that everybody can feel free to speak up in and be themselves, because you start to hear people speaking from their experiences, their lifestyles, their relationships with different people. And if you listen, you will always hear something in those conversations that was like, I never thought about that. I never thought like that. It's just, whether you accept it or not, whether it fits with you or not, right? You will still pick up on something that's like, I never thought about or never considered that before. and then let you make a better informed decision about yourself and what you accept about yourself and what you accept about your own situations, right? So I have to approach it like that, and I think that's the action for me, like the call to action, that I would give to the audience today is try to approach people with that mindset. Everybody's going to have something they disagree with you on. Don't focus on that. That's life, as you said.
That's life.
If you live long enough, you will find somebody long enough to form your own opinions. You're going to live long enough to find somebody that has a different one. Give them a chance to speak their side, to express where they're coming from. Going back to harmony as well, right? If I let somebody speak the truth about what they've gone through, or about maybe how I've harmed them, I can learn something. I can learn something to make myself a better person and to use better judgment for me as I'm going forward, right?
And along with that, when you receive differing viewpoints, don't be so quick to pass judgment on it.
Absolutely.
Very good.
Just let it ride.
Absolutely.
It doesn't mean you have incorporated it into your own being, but now you are aware that there's different ways of thinking.
Love that.
Very good.
And one of the most basic ones is, that old book, men are from Mars and women are from Venus, right? But if you take it to how God created the genders, male and female, he gave male gender certain traits that tend to be predominantly in male and then, of course, female. We know that each one has a tendency to feel like theirs is the best way and sort of negate or nullify or minimalize the other. But we need to realize that there's a reason why there's this way to do it, but then again, there's another way to do it. And I know we've all experienced as married individuals the fact that we've thought something was the best way to go, and then our spouse did it differently, and you realize, oh, that was a better way to go.
Facts. But I think the humility that everybody needs to see and to admit that is the important thing, because you don't have balance. We talk about this all the time on this podcast, how important balance is. And that's where I think that if you have, two polar opposites of something, the balance of where those two come together a lot of times is where you're going to find the most peace, harmony, and solutions to things. You know what I mean? And I think that even applies to politics in some regard, right? But, when you talk about like male and female and the nurture versus nature, and as you said, there's times when maybe a harder and nature type approach is better. But there's a whole lot of times where the nurture approach is better too. And it depends on if you're talking about children or the relationship between the husband and wives themselves. But letting both sides kind of speak where they're coming from and what's driving those decisions, and accepting as you hear it, not accepting like I agree or this is my mindset. I accept that this is your experience.
Yes.
I accept that this is how you feel genuinely. And if I love and care about this person, I want to hear you out, and I want to give consideration to what your experiences are, what you're feeling, because I care about this person and I want to go on and be better, and I want them to be better. And when we are both growing, the relationship is growing, and everything just works out better that way, right? So the balance, hearing people out, and like you said, not rejecting somebody because they're coming from a different mindset or a different approach. Hear them out, because a lot of times, your way is not going to always be the right way. They may have, again, something they bring to the table. It's like, I didn't think about that. I didn't consider that. But that is the better way. I've had that experience quite a few times.
So I got a question for you. I know it's getting to that time, but have we touched on, and if we touched on it already, we don't have to talk about it, but have we touched on how do you respond when you are not being accepted?
So back to the serenity prayer, right? Right? God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Yeah. And in my mind, that is, I'm not going to let me drive myself crazy.
Very good.
And it goes back to the validation topic. I'm not going to be trying to get you to accept me if you can.
Yes.
I'm not. I'm not going to spend my time trying to make somebody accept me. And again, this is where it comes back to, if I am not accepting myself,
that's it.
I may let somebody else's refusal to accept me affect me in some way. It's going to hinder me, because I'm valuing myself based on, does this person value me? Does this person accept me? I can't control that. So wisdom would say, don't let your self-acceptance be based on whether or not somebody else accepts you. You have to figure out what is your ideal version of yourself. You have to realize, am I achieving that or on the path for that? And learn to accept yourself and love yourself for it and let that be enough. Count it as a blessing and accept it and be happy with it. When someone else does accept you, you can't force anybody else to do that.
Right.
So, I accept the acceptance of people that accept me. And if you don't, I don't have time for that. I got other people that do love me that I can spend time with, and other things that are more productive I can be spending my time doing rather than trying to force somebody to accept me. It doesn't work like that.
Very good.
Right?
Very good.
And we don't have to take it personally.
No,
we
Not
don't.
at all.
Because I was thinking about this and I thought it was funny. I was thinking about this. Okay, I wrote this. I had to write test scopes and objectives for my job, right? And at the time, my manager said, "Ethan, write me something, a test spec and a criteria for this. We don't have one. Can you please write one for me?" So I wrote it up, and I was like, "Oh my God, man, I don't feel like writing this up." Because I knew his manager had this red pen.
The dreaded red
The dreaded red pen. Michael Rivenberg. That was him, tower known. And I will bring it to him. I said, "Hey, Mike, can you?"
The world does too at this point. Go ahead, bro. Go ahead.
Right.
Go ahead.
Hey, he'll probably love it.
Right.
You know him. So I will bring it. I say, "Mike, can you check this out? Go through it, man." As soon as he got it, he went to work.
Where's my red pen?
He started. It's unacceptable. It's unacceptable. You see what I'm saying? It's unacceptable.
But did you trust him enough to accept his criticism of your work?
I hated it.
Got you.
That's the thing,
Gotcha.
because I knew at the time, but it's kind of like a love-hate thing,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
You hate it at the time because he's critiquing a hard effort that you put.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? And within seconds, he reduced or improved. See, it's two ways that you can look at it.
Yes.
You see?
Yes.
And I thought that was, at the time, I thought it was terror. But as you get older and you see the end result, you're like, he was improving it, not reducing it.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, you remind me of someone I worked with years ago, and it was the same type of situation where the person wasn't pleasant to be around. They always seemed to have an attitude. People tried to avoid them left and right, but the things that they pointed out work-wise was spot on. And for that reason, if you were to ask me, would I want that person to be part of my group, I would say yes. Knowing that the person has an ill temperament, but yes, because so it's accept, and that goes back to what I said earlier. You accept, even though you don't necessarily agree with. In this case, his mannerisms, the way he did things, but work-wise. And that was the reason why he was doing it. He was a stickler for detail and doing it right. And if you want the organization to work well, you need somebody like that.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. That's awesome, man.
Interesting.
You know, this is just my final thought. It's just it's really good to have these conversations with people, because with words like acceptance, they're not the easiest thing to grasp, especially when you take the time and look at the definition and you say, man, I never thought of it like that. You know, I think I was misusing this word all this time. And now I can look at acceptance from the positive side of healing. I feel grounded now. And I don't have to manipulate myself or others in order to feel a hard work. You know what I'm saying? I would say inauthentic work towards it. I can truly be myself, kind of like what you're saying, Chief, about being myself. If someone doesn't like it, it's all good.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
You know, it's like water off a duck's back. You know, and I think that's our approach to how we dealing with behaviors, people that are not necessarily pleasant to work with, when we're getting criticized and critiqued and different things like that. It's about building our character in a place that we can send or we can become valuable tools to someone else. You know what I mean? And I think that's the key. And I'm gonna just say this last thing. And do you want to tear relationships apart, or do you want to build relationships? That's another thing too. Is acceptance, are you trying to tear a relationship? Are you disposing of relationships? Or are relationships disposable in your sight? Or do you really want to build a strong relationship with people? If you really want to build a strong relationship, man, define these words properly, man, and then you'll be okay. Anybody else have any last words?
Last thought I'm looking at here on the definition of acceptance is it talks about finding peace while still striving for improvement.
Beautiful.
Finding peace while still striving for improvement. I think that's kind of encapsulates, I think, whether we're talking about a situation, self, other people, finding peace while striving for improvement, trying to find the best way possible through things, trying to find the best possible outcome. But trying to, change things where it can be done and where it's acceptable and not going to be harmful to other people, are what I think are the important things. And then we'll let Brother James give his final thoughts here, and then we do have a call to action. So.
Okay, my final words would be to part of what you already said, have value in yourself. And then also find the value in others as well.
Beautiful.
And in doing so, I think we'll be okay.
Absolutely.
Beautiful.
Because everybody does have value and something to contribute. Absolutely right. Absolutely right. Very good. Yeah, so our call to action for today's episode is identify something that you could be resisting that you can choose to see differently today. Identify something that you could be resisting that you can choose to see differently today. And then part 2 to this is acceptance might be that first step towards freedom. I actually did want to jump into that because I know you mentioned freedom in prison before, but I know we're out of time. But that's just an important thought to kind of dwell on is acceptance might be that first step towards freedom and just having your mind free to accept and learn from more things, right? So
I think you hit on that.
Yeah. Okay.
It's very good.
All right.
All right, everyone. Please like, share, subscribe. This is Let Your Words Count. God bless you.